It was a cold, rainy Monday morning, the kind that made everything feel a little heavier. The windows of the small cafe were fogged up, and the sound of soft jazz played in the background, mixing with the quiet chatter of people trying to escape the storm outside. Sarah sat alone at a corner table near the window, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. She was in her late 20s, dressed simply in a worn-out gray sweater and jeans. Her tired eyes scanned the pages of an old novel, but she wasn't really reading. Life had been hard lately, bills piling up, long work shifts, and dreams that always felt just out of reach. But this cafe was her little escape. It was her routine every Monday before her shift began. A moment of peace in a noisy world. The bell above the cafe door jingled as it opened. A tall man in his early 30s stepped in, shaking raindrops from his coat. He looked around, clearly searching for an empty seat, but every table was taken. People sat in groups, deep in conversation or typing away on laptops. He sighed, looking defeated, then noticed Sarah sitting alone. He hesitated, his eyes gentle but unsure. Slowly, he walked over, standing a few steps from her table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice soft but steady. "Would you mind if I sit here? I can't seem to find a seat." Sarah looked up, surprised by his polite tone. She could see the exhaustion on his face, like someone who had a lot on his shoulders. She smiled warmly, pushing her bag aside. "Of course," she said, nodding toward the empty chair across from her. "Please, sit." The man looked genuinely relieved. "Thank you. I really needed this coffee." He sat down, brushing his damp coat over the chair's back. They sat quietly for a moment, the rain tapping against the window beside them. He ordered a black coffee, and Sarah returned to her book, though she found herself sneaking glances at him. They exchanged a few polite words. About the weather, the crowd, how mornings felt harder on rainy days. There was something calming in the silence between them, like two souls simply breathing in the same storm. And neither of them knew, this small act of kindness would change both of their lives forever. The soft rhythm of the rain outside continued as Sarah and the man slowly eased into conversation. The cafe, though still bustling around them, seemed to fade into the background. In that quiet corner, something unspoken passed between them, something real. He sipped his coffee, his hands slightly trembling, his eyes fixed on the table for a moment before speaking. "I'm a single father," he said quietly, not looking up. "It's been a rough few months. I came here hoping for just 10 minutes of peace before the next wave of chaos." Sarah looked at him gently, sensing that the words hadn't come easy. "That sounds really hard," she replied softly. "I can't imagine what it's like doing it all alone." He offered a tired smile. "It's the best thing in the world, and the hardest." Something in his voice tugged at Sarah's heart. She closed her book and leaned in just a little. "I get it," she said, her voice filled with empathy. "I work 2 jobs, morning shift at the bakery and evenings at a bookstore. It's exhausting. But I still dream of becoming a writer one day." He looked up, surprised. "A writer? That's amazing." She shrugged. "Maybe. Right now, I just write when I can, usually on napkins or my phone. But I keep hoping." Before either could say more, a waiter brought over their orders, but had gotten them completely mixed up. Her simple tea and croissant ended up in front of him, while his black coffee and muffin landed on her side. They both stared at their plates, then burst into laughter. It was the first time he had laughed in weeks, and it felt like a warm breeze cutting through a cold storm. "I think the universe wants us to share," he joked, sliding the muffin toward the middle. "I won't say no to that," she smiled, tearing the croissant in half. As they shared the pastry, the conversation deepened, yet it never turned heavy. They didn't talk about jobs or finances, or anything that sounded like bragging or pity. Just 2 strangers, sharing a table, sharing their hearts, even if just for a while. No names were exchanged. No expectations set. Just a connection, simple, honest, and unexpectedly comforting. And in that brief meeting, something began to change, in both of them. The soft hum of the cafe carried on as their laughter faded into a comfortable silence. Sarah looked at the man across from her, this stranger who somehow didn't feel like a stranger at all. His eyes, though tired, seemed a little lighter now. The lines on his face weren't just stress anymore, they held a quiet gratitude. Just as she opened her mouth to ask his name, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and instantly grew tense. His expression shifted from ease to worry. He sighed and looked up at her with an apologetic smile. "It's my son's school," he said, standing up quickly. "I have to go. I'm really sorry." Sarah nodded, trying not to look disappointed. "Of course. I hope everything's okay." He grabbed his coat, fumbling slightly. "Yeah, probably just something small. But, it was really nice meeting you. Thank you for letting me sit here." Before she could respond, he was already halfway to the door. In his rush, a small white business card slipped from his pocket and fluttered silently to the floor beneath the table. Sarah sat there, blinking, the warmth of the moment slowly giving way to an unexpected emptiness. She looked down at the half-eaten pastry between them, her smile fading into something more bittersweet. It had been such a simple interaction, no big promises, no expectations, yet it had touched her in a way she hadn't expected. For a moment, she stared at the empty chair across from her, as if it still held his presence. People came and went in her life all the time, but this felt different. There had been a softness in him, a tiredness that matched her own, and an honesty she rarely saw. She sighed and took one last sip of her lukewarm coffee. "Strange how one short conversation can stay with you," she whispered to herself. Unaware of the business card resting under the table, she gathered her things and headed to work, convinced she'd never see him again. But fate had already started weaving something behind the scenes. The rain had stopped by evening, leaving the streets damp and shining under the streetlights. The cafe, now quieter, was getting ready to close for the night. Sarah had already left for her second shift at the bookstore, her day far from over. Her younger sister, Emma, worked part-time at the cafe, helping clean up tables and restock supplies. As she wiped down the corner table near the window, Sarah's usual spot, something white caught her eye underneath a chair. She reached down and picked it up, a simple, elegant business card. She read it once. Then twice. David Carter, founder and CEO, Carter Tech. Her eyes widened. She recognized the name. Everyone did. Carter Tech was one of the biggest tech companies in the country, and David Carter, he was often on magazine covers, interviews, and business panels. Emma looked around, puzzled, then suddenly froze. "Wait. Sarah was sitting here today," she whispered. Heart racing, she grabbed her phone and called Sarah immediately. "Sarah. You'll never believe this. That man you had coffee with, he dropped something. It's his card." Sarah, exhausted after her shift, sat on the break room bench and frowned. "His card? What do you mean?" Emma read the name aloud again. Silence. Sarah's eyes widened. The name hit her like a wave. She sat still, the memory of his face flashing in her mind, the tired eyes, the humble words, the way he shared a pastry like an ordinary man. "A CEO? Are you sure?" she asked in disbelief. 100%, Emma said, voice still buzzing with shock. "He's super rich, and single." "Sarah, do you realize what this means?" Sarah didn't answer right away. Her heart pounded, but not from excitement. She thought of the man she had spoken to, not the CEO. Just a father, tired and kind, who had needed 10 minutes of peace. She slowly hung up the call, staring at the business card now in her hand. Then, gently, she placed it inside her journal and closed the cover. She wasn't going to chase him. Not for money. Not for headlines. Because to her, he wasn't David Carter the CEO. He was the quiet man who shared a coffee and a moment of honesty on a rainy morning. And somehow, that meant more. A full week had passed since the rainy morning at the cafe, but Sarah hadn't stopped thinking about him, not once. The way he spoke, the sadness in his eyes, the quiet strength in his voice. His presence had lingered like a gentle echo in her heart. She had tucked his business card into her journal and locked it away, deciding not to chase something that wasn't meant to be. Still, part of her couldn't help but wonder if he thought of her too. Then, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, as Sarah sat in her tiny apartment editing notes for a short story, there was a soft knock at the door. She opened it to find no one there, just a small, cream-colored envelope resting on the doormat. No stamp. No name on the front. Just a simple gold seal. Curious and slightly nervous, she brought it inside, carefully breaking the seal. Inside was a letter, handwritten in neat, thoughtful lines. Dear Sarah. I'm not sure if this is strange, but I couldn't stop thinking about you. You probably don't know who I am. Not really. But you didn't treat me like anyone special that day, and I'll never forget it. You spoke to me like a human being, not a title. You listened. And in that brief moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. You reminded me of the kind of person I want near me, and more importantly, in my son's life. Here's my number. If you're willing, I'd love to continue that conversation. And maybe, share that pastry again. Warmly. David. Folded inside the letter was a photograph. It was David, smiling, kneeling beside a little boy, no more than 6 years old, with the same soft eyes. The boy held a toy airplane and wore a wide grin. Sarah's hands trembled. Her throat tightened. She placed the photo gently on the table, and tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from something she couldn't name. Hope, maybe. She smiled, wiping a tear away. Maybe some tables aren't random, she whispered. She looked out the window where the sun was breaking through the clouds. Maybe, they're destiny.